Today we're going over the infamous Gen 13 animated movie. It was first screened for the general public at the Wizard World Chicago convention in July of 1998, and then was later released in 2000, but never in the US, only in other countries. The problems began when Buena Vista Pictures, which is part of Disney, was going to distribute it, but at the time Jim Lee was selling Wildstorm to DC, which is effectively a Warner Brothers property, so they didn't want to release something that was for a competitor at the time. That was coupled with the fact that the content of the movie was a little bit more mature than Disney's used to releasing, but we'll get to that. But first, just in case this is all new to you, what exactly is Gen 13? Gen 13 is a comic that was created by Jim Lee and Brandon Choi and illustrated by J. Scott Campbell. The team made their first full appearance in a comic crossover called Deathmate Black. The following year, the team would go on to star in their own miniseries, which is what this movie is based on. The film is directed by Kevin Altieri, who directed some episodes of Batman the Animated Series. The movie actually sports a really good cast of voice actors. We have Alicia Witt as Caitlin Fairchild, John Delancey as John Lynch, Elizabeth Daily as Freefall, Flea as Grunge, Mark Hamill as Threshold, Lauren Lane as Ivana Bile, and the legendary Cloris Leachman as Helga Kleinman. Fair warning, we are going to talk about spoilers as we compare the movie to the original comic and talk about what's the same and what's different. The movie actually starts off pretty similar to the comic as we see Stephen Callahan desperately trying to escape international operations with his family. Unfortunately for them, the outcome is the same as in the book.
Rachel! No!
With Stephen even going as far as displaying some of the powers that he had. And just like the comic, Callahan's young son is forced to see his father killed. We are introduced to Caitlin Fairchild, who is in college and has no idea how her life is about to drastically change. And even though she has a really small part in the comic, they even went as far as to add her roommate Alexa, who is still mean as ever.
You got a problem, sister. You ought to see a shrink. Of all the girls in the school, I end up rooming with the psycho.
In the comic, when international operations comes to Fairchild, they're a lot more direct about having to leave right now when they collect her from the college. They're a lot nicer to her in the movie.
I've been authorized to offer you, Miss Fairchild, a full scholarship to Project Genesis. This brochure should explain everything clearly.
Well, I'm in the middle of a semester right now, but thank you. I'll consider it.
Later on, as Fairchild returns to her dorm, as if all the blood and gunfire at the beginning of the movie wasn't enough to show us that this was mature, we get even more glimpses as to why Disney probably didn't want to distribute this.
For Christ's sake! Get rid of her. You keep it down, you're embarrassing me. What are you doing here anyway?
Thank goodness for well-placed doorknobs, right? Looks like someone's a fan of Austin Powers.
Oh, behave.
And that appears to be the final straw for Caitlin, because she finally decides to call Project Genesis. Once Caitlin arrives at Project Genesis, she is first introduced to Helga.
I am Helga Kleinman, your instructor here at Project Genesis. Here, let us have a look at you. Oh, a bit skinny, but we fixed that. Come.
The first character Fairchild runs into, literally, is Eddie Chang, aka Grunge.
truly sorry about that.
It's okay, just get off me.
And of course, wherever Grunge is, Freefall can't be too far behind.
Don't mind Grunge, honey. He's just got a problem taking his vitamins.
So I noticed.
I'm Roxy.
Caitlin Fairchild.
Well, welcome to the club, Caitlin Fairchild.
We're then introduced to Threshold, who is in the middle of a sparring match. But unlike his comic counterpart, this Threshold is a lot more merciful.
Nobody laughs at me.
And with that, a nice little training montage begins. Wait a second, is that Burnout? And Rainmaker too? Yes, I'm sorry to say, if Burnout and Rainmaker are two of your favorites, they're relegated to background cameos in this movie. They only show up a couple of times, like in this scene where Rainmaker is fighting Fairchild in some training combat. I also find it interesting that this scene establishes that the green and purple outfit that Fairchild is known for apparently is like the school uniform here, because everybody has one. And now we come to the infamous shower scene. So since I don't know how much YouTube will allow us to show, I'm just going to focus on this still shot of Caitlin, but basically her and Freefall are having their moment here where they get to know each other. Now the scene doesn't really show anything because they're both obscured by the steam in the shower, but again, it's YouTube, so I never know what they're going to take videos down for. This always reminded me of the scene in Road Trip where Tom Green is telling the story and the girls call him out for talking about girls always being topless in a locker room.
She was standing around topless? Girls just don't stand around naked.
Yeah, they do, okay? This is my story, okay? Do you want to hear it or not?
Later on, as Ivana and Threshold are monitoring the kids, remember how I said everybody gets a purple and green suit? Well, that includes Helga, and I couldn't help but laugh.
You serious?
John Lynch finally shows up in the movie, and Ivana likes to call him by his nickname, which is Jack. Apart from the Gen 13 kids, John is one of my other favorite characters, so it's really cool to have an animated version of him here.
Really, Jack, the Mayday was a bit much.
You never can tell. These planes are so temperamental. And we are out here in the middle of nowhere. Actually, I've been hearing some curious rumors. Something about Project Genesis. Gen 13?
Later, after a scene where the kids actually get to meet with and talk with John Lynch, we get back towards the comic storyline. Caitlin feels sick and decides to head out to the infirmary in the middle of the night. Because she feels sick, she doesn't notice that strange things are happening to her body.
Oh God, this place is such a maze. I'll never find... Oh, what's wrong with me?
And in classic movie fashion, Fairchild just happens to find a computer that has all the information she needs, including information about her father, Alex Fairchild. We also get glimpses of Team 7, which for those Wildstorm fans know, that is essential lore not just to Gen 13, but Wildstorm in general.
Stephen Callahan? Matthew's father? Oh my God, what did they do to you? Let's see what else is in here.
Grunge and Freefall startle Caitlin as she's in the middle of her research, and they let her know that they usually come to this sector for privacy. But that privacy is interrupted pretty quickly.
All of you freeze! This area is restricted. Back away from the computer. Are you freaking deaf? Move!
The guard knocks the kids around a little bit, and then that leads to this amazing transformation scene.
Somebody make it stop!
Oh, but don't you worry, that is not where they stop concerning this transformation scene. And I'm sure at this point Disney was like,
I'm out.
Up until this point, all the story you've seen is actually just from issue 1, which is pretty impressive that they were able to get so much out of just one issue. In the miniseries, issue 2 just throws us in the middle of the action, and we find out what happened as the story goes along. But here, we're going to just continue forward in the narrative. But first, I forgot that Sarah Rainmaker actually does have a speaking part in this movie.
Hello? Hey! Open up! What's going on out there? Hello? This is Sarah Rainmaker in Section D. The door to my room isn't working.
And at this point, while Fairchild, Grunge, and Freefall make their escape, the rest of the kids in the compound are knocked out and prepared for evacuation, which is something I do remember happening in the comics. And just like in the comics, the rest of the kids are captured, except for Fairchild, who must now decide to go back to the compound and save everyone. But not before she has a showdown against Helga in a mech suit. That's right. You heard me correct. Helga in a mech suit.
Dear me. My, what big naughty girl you are becoming.
Helga?
And is it just me, or does Helga's mech look like the rock monster from Mega Man? I mean, she does pick up an actual rock during the fight, but, well, anyway, I digress. Then, with the torture scene, they surprisingly take an opposite route, where they take the original and actually make it more PG. Grunge kicking like a baby there in the background is so funny to me. And nothing says torture like a machine that has giant claws around it. Now, fans of the comic will know that by this point in the story, Fairchild would have had her fight with another Image creation, Dale Keown's Pit, which was basically his version of the Hulk. But, of course, with copyright issues, there was no way he was ever going to be in this movie. Which is a shame, because he and Fairchild's fight is one of the highlights of the miniseries, and it really allows her a chance to showcase her super strength and abilities. But her powers are also on display in the movie, as she's able to throw Helga's mech suit at the soldiers, and later on she even encounters tanks, like this one here, which I'm pretty sure is from the movie Aliens. In the comics, it's actually Lynch who discovers that Ivana is half cyborg and ends up having a knockdown, drag-out fight with her before he finally subdues her. But in the movie, it's actually the Gen 13 kids that stand against her.
You miserable brats. Look at this mess. And I just had these nails done.
Oh my god!
And finally, after the battle with Ivana, the kids try to escape into the desert, but run into Threshold. And Mark Hamill reminds us why he's the king of evil laughs.
I do not believe this!
Now, before we get to the resolution of the movie, I know there's one question that fans of the miniseries have had this whole time. Where in the world is Threshold's sister Bliss? Well, here's your answer.
After I finish with these three, you're making a mistake, Matthew. This is the last person that you want to harm. Caitlin is your sister.
What?
That's right, that little baby that he was holding at the beginning of the movie was actually Fairchild. And you know, as a fan of the comic and knowing that this was the only movie that was ever going to be made, I'm okay with this change. Now, if they had planned stuff going forward, then it definitely would have messed up the mythology more. But for now, this is what it is. But with that in mind, it is possible that they did want to do more after this, because basically, just like in the miniseries, all the villains get away, and our heroes have a typical wrap up here at the end where they literally fly off into the sunset. And there you have it, the infamous Gen 13 animated movie. Does it have problems? Of course it does, but I was always entertained by it. As a piece of Wildstorm history, it's definitely worth the watch, so if you can track it down, give it a try. There's not many movie and TV projects out there that feature Wildstorm characters, but I do plan to cover each one at some point. So if you like this video, be sure and hit like and subscribe, because I'll be hitting all the other Wildstorm projects eventually. And until next time, we'll see you then.